This is Top Accolade Global News Update. I am Abiodun Mohammed. Russia ruled out a Christmas ceasefire after nearly 10 months of war in Ukraine and rejected a call by Kiev to start withdrawing troops by Christmas as a step to end Europe's biggest conflict since World War II. Russia and Ukraine are not currently engaged in talks to end the fighting, which is raging in the east and south with little movement on either side. Violence returned to Kiev on Wednesday with the first major drone attack on Ukraine's capital in weeks. 2 administrative buildings were hit, but air defenses largely repelled the attack. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said 13 drones had been shot down. In one Kiev district, where snow lay on the ground, residents said they heard the loud whirring engine of an Iranian Shahed drone, followed by a powerful explosion at a building next to their homes. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, millions more displaced, and cities reduced to rubble since Russia invaded its neighbor on February 24th, saying it needed to protect Russian speakers from Ukrainian far-right nationalists. Kiev and its allies call it an unprovoked war of choice. Asked on Wednesday whether Moscow had seen proposals for a Christmas ceasefire, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters, "No such offers have been received from anybody. This topic is not on the agenda." China raced to vaccinate its most vulnerable people on Thursday in anticipation of waves of COVID-19 infections, with some analysts expecting the death toll to soar after a loosening of strict controls that kept the pandemic at bay for 3 years. The push comes as the World Health Organization also raised concerns that China's 1.4 billion population was not adequately vaccinated, and the United States offered to help China deal with a surge in infections. Beijing last Wednesday began dismantling its tough zero-COVID controls, dropping testing requirements and easing quarantine rules that had caused mental anxiety for tens of millions and battered the world's second-largest economy. The pivot away from President Xi Jinping's signature zero-COVID policy followed unprecedented widespread protest against it, but WHO Emergencies Director Mike Ryan said COVID-19 infections were exploding in China well before the government's decision to phase out its stringent regime. There are increasing signs of chaos during China's change of tack, with long queues outside fever clinics, runs on medicines, and panic buying across the country. One video posted online on Wednesday showed several people wearing thick winter clothes hooked up to intravenous drips as they sat on stools on the street outside a clinic in central Hubei province. An Irish soldier has been killed on the United Nations peacekeeping mission after a convoy of 2 armored utility vehicles carrying 8 personnel traveling to Beirut came under small arms fire, Ireland's defense forces have said in a statement. Another member of the United Nations Interim Forces in Lebanon, UNIFIL, is in a serious condition, having undergone surgery following the incident late on Wednesday, the statement said. 2 other soldiers are being treated for minor injuries. In quote, "It is with deep regret that the Irish Defense Forces can confirm the death of one of our peacekeepers in a serious incident in Lebanon last night," the Defense Forces said. The reason behind the attack is unclear. Irish Defense Minister Simon Coveney, who is in New York for a UN Security Council meeting, said he will meet UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres later on Thursday to discuss the incident. UNIFIL was established in 1978 to oversee the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon during the Lebanese civil war and the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. It is made up of over 10,000 personnel from a number of countries around the world, led by Indonesia, India, and Italy. Peru has declared a nationwide state of emergency amid a week of protest and political upheaval following the removal and arrest of former President Pedro Castillo. Peruvian Defense Minister Alberto Otoroya announced the new 30-day measure on Wednesday, which he said involved, in quote, "the suspension of freedom of movement and assembly," and could include a curfew due to acts of vandalism and violence, including roadblocks. The move came as a judge ordered Castillo to remain in prison on charges of rebellion and conspiracy for another 48 hours in the run-up to a release hearing. Castillo supporters have taken to the streets across the South American nation to demand the left-wing leader's release, as well as new elections and the removal of his successor, former Vice President Dina Boluarte. The crisis began last week when Castillo, a former rural teacher and union leader who took office in July of last year, announced plans to disband Peru's Congress and rule by decree. The move was widely denounced as unconstitutional and prompted the opposition-led legislature last Wednesday to vote overwhelmingly in favor of removing him in the third impeachment attempt of his embattled presidency. Boluarte was sworn in shortly after as Peru's first female president, and Castillo was arrested and transferred to a police prison near the capital, Lima, where he is still being held. Rwandan President Paul Kagame on Wednesday criticized the United Nations over the concerns it has raised in the case of Paul Rusesabagina, a US permanent resident jailed in Rwanda who was portrayed as a hero in the film Hotel Rwanda. Rusesabagina, aged 67, was sentenced last year to 25 years in prison on 8 terrorism charges tied to an organization opposed to Kagame's rule. He has denied all the charges and refused to take part in the trial that he and his supporters have called a political sham. When asked if he would meet with US President Joe Biden, Kagame said he was not sure yet. The United States in May determined that Rusesabagina had been wrongfully detained, citing a lack of fair trial guarantees during Rusesabagina's trial. Asked whether US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's advocacy is helping or hurting Rusesabagina's case, Kagame said, in quote, "I think from what I am saying, you can conclude." When asked about Kagame's comments, the US State Department spokesperson said Washington has been clear about its concerns related to Rusesabagina's trial and conviction, particularly the lack of fair trial guarantees, and continues to urge the government to address those concerns. That is the size of top accolade global news update. You can follow us on our social media platforms as displayed on your screen. Happy Thursday.